speak on behalf of my two other colleagues, Vladimir Distov and Ivan Ivanovsky, and myself as well. We form kind of a group that works, the three of us are scholars at the faculties, Ivan and myself at the Faculty of Architecture, University of Civil and Methodius, and Vladimir Distov is at the American College in Skopje. So what I will present is a case regarding Skopje. And Skopje, as I don't know if you know, is the capital of the Republic of North Macedonia. It's the largest, it's the economic, cultural, political center of the country. And it's a very interesting city in terms of history, especially for an architect. I'm an architect and my colleagues as well, although I teach also history of architecture and I'm involved in protection of cultural heritage. It's a very interesting case because during the ages it has been built and rebuilt, and it was its tissue was written and rewritten many times due to different political changes, due to different earthquakes, floods, and so on and so on. So, if we speak about historical continuity, traces are back in Roman times, and it has overlapped fragments of city tissue from Roman times, from Byzantine, from Ottoman, from 19th century, early modern, post-war, post-earthquake, post-socialist, so they all either overlap each other or are juxtaposed one next to another. So among all these layers, the one belonging to the 20th century heritage is probably the most superior one, both in terms of quantity, in terms of territorial presence, but also in terms of quality. And we can easily say that actually the architectural identity of the city is defined by this 20th century heritage. So one reason about this is actually the earthquake that happened on July 26, 1963. It was an earthquake of catastrophic proportion with more than 1,000 casualties, with more than 3,000 injured people, and it dramatically changed the urban tissue since up to 70 to 80%, it was never precisely defined, but 70 to 80% of the total built fund was either demolished in the earthquake or damaged beyond repair. So after the earthquake, the city was literally reduced to rubble. All kinds of monuments and historical periods. I will try to stick to the notes in order not to be too long. So aware of the scope and the complexity of the new situation on one hand, but also aware of the local capacities on the other, both the local government of the city and the federal government, Yugoslav at the time, asked for international help. And with the resolution of the United Nations since 1964 onwards, the whole process of planning and partly reconstruction of the city was led by the United Nations expert teams. It was very interesting case, the process of renewal of the city in every case, since both experts were involved in all different phases, in analysis, in planning, in the reconstruction process, and so on. And it's a story of its own to speak about it. And also the international community was widely involved. More than 80 countries worldwide in the period when the world was very much divided between the East and the Western Bloc, and very much into this Cold War. More than 80 countries worldwide donated money, material resources, buildings, project designs, and so on to the city. So Skopje became known as a city of solidarity. I mentioned the experts, just to name few. The master plan of the city was led by Adolf Siborowski. Adolf Siborowski was a Polish expert. He was involved in the post-war reconstruction of Warsaw as well. Then the city center was another different and a very interesting topic. Invited competition was launched by the Yugoslav government and the United Nations. Moris Rotival was involved from the international experts. Tange and his team, Van den Broeke and Bakema were in the competition project, and this is Kenza Tange with his team with one of the models of the city center. This is the original competition model from 1965. So within a short time span of approximately 15 years, 15 to 20 if we count the planning process as well, Skopje went through an intensive building process and literally became a test ground for a new, late modern, and at certain times radical paradigms, radical architectural paradigms that resulted in this valuable collection of architectural artifacts. This is just a selection of many, many, many more. So, in the beginning of the 90s, some new processes emerged, namely Yugoslavian Federation fell apart, and as you can see, in 1991, Macedonia declares independence from Yugoslav Federation, and what followed was, and still is, a long and highly turbulent and uncertain period of political changes, of nationalist tensions, economic struggle, and to a great extent decline. And as one can assume, within such circumstances, the position and the condition of the modernist heritage or 20th century heritage is not very favorable. The buildings that were already aged, to a certain extent obsolete, that were systematically neglected and left to decay, all of a sudden were also threatened by a governmentally led, a very political project that intended to erase a certain unfavorable history and to create a new so-called national capital. So the project was obviously political in nature. Here we have two situations. One is from 1996. The empty spots, this is the main square, this is another part. And this is current situation, and all these colored positions are either new buildings that were erected, new monuments, new things within the river bank, and so on, which to a great extent contributed to creating of this new and hollow image, new eclectic image. So one thing was inserting these new eclectic buildings, neoclassical, neo-baroque, or I don't know if you can define them. And the other thing was, which was brutal as well, was disfigurement and alteration of the authentic appearance of many modern or late modern masterpieces. As you can see, this is a concrete. This used to be a concrete building. So, having all this in mind, many exemplary buildings of Skopje post-earthquake renewal could be considered as a heritage in danger of the post-earthquake renewal of Skopje, which is very important and symbolic for Skopje, but also of the previous modernist phases of the city. The post-war or the pre-war phase of the city could be considered heritage in danger. So what can one or a group of people do when the buildings are threatened? Not only the building, but also the knowledge about the building. This is a documentation of some of the buildings. When the institutions that are supposed to keep and to safeguard this heritage are not only ignorant, but at times in favor of this violent erasure of the personal and collective history. Well, the aim of this paper and the presentation is to show how something that usually firmly belongs within the realm of professional preservation could become an act of individual architectural activism of small group of scholars, those are the three of us, and further supported with huge enthusiasm, knowledge, skills, and personal involvement of more than a dozen young colleagues, former students of architecture. So, with a strong belief that the buildings are significant enough to be considered a heritage, and trying to avoid handicaps and embrace possibilities, we conducted our personal experimental preservation, an extensive process which was consisted of saving some archival material, then organizing and systematizing the material, partial digitization, redrawing, mapping, and analyzing the material, also collecting other relevant material from either institutional archives or personal archives of the living authors, of their families, and so on. Then building models as a way, as a method of representation in order to bring the material closer to the general audience, and especially because many of the buildings are no longer available or visible in their original crisp, clean form. Then documented the exhibited material and preparing architectural exhibitions as public events that target wide variety of audience: architects, professional students of architecture, institutions, and mostly citizens. This is one of the authors with his masterpiece, the model of his masterpiece. So most of the exhibitions took place in Skopje within different institutions, cultural institutions, but also international ones, such as the 2014 Venice Biennale project, Finding, or the exhibition, this is the pavilion within the premises of the Arsenale, or the exhibition about Skopje that took place in Vienna in Benaki Museum in Athens, or the segment of the post-earthquake reconstruction of Skopje within the exhibition Towards a Concrete Utopia, Architecture in Yugoslavia, in MoMA in New York last year. This was the first meeting of the MoMA group that took place in Skopje in 2015, and this is Skopje chapter within the premises of MoMA in New York. So to sum up, what we basically did throughout these years, we talked a lot on different occasions. We collected material, researched it, analyzed it, prepared it, and exhibited it publicly in order to try to. We did some publications as well, and basically try to raise awareness, initiate discussion, communicate certain ideas, change the way of thinking, and try to influence and change the environment. And with the slide showing the presentation of the Venice Biennale Pavilion Deck in Skopje, I thank you